The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Welcome to the Influencer's Edge. This is the place where you come to get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques to leapfrog over the pack in sales, persuasion, and influence. Be sure you visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com. And while you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now sit back, tune in, and enjoy today's episode. All right, welcome to the Influencer's Edge. I am your host with the most, Paul Ross. Greetings to you across the ocean, across the sea, wherever you may be. I'm getting poetic. So today we have a very interesting guest because he's made a lot of money, which always gets my attention, and he's got some novel ways of doing it. So today our guest is Phil Better. Phil, before we get into your biography and the rest of that, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, buddy.
Now, I warned Phil in the green room conversation before the show that this is not the typical kind of show where we droll on with the typical kind of questions, and he's had all the warnings and caveats and cautions. So are you ready to really dive in?
I am ready for the multitude of different questions you're going to be asking me, buddy.
Okay. So let's just get into the bio. The bio to me, no matter how interesting, is still yada, yada, yada. So first and foremost, in addition to being a smart businessman and everything else, you're a podcaster. Love it. I'm a podcaster too, as you know. Phil's podcasting journey began in 2014, inspired by Kevin Smith. I'm assuming Kevin Smith is the guy, Bob and Silent Bob. And
yeah,
I like that guy. Kevin Smith's Smodcast, launching the Phil Better Show in 2017. You quickly amassed a dedicated following. In 2020, you started Invest in Yourself, a digital entrepreneur podcast. What does that mean? What's a digital entrepreneur?
a digital entrepreneur is someone who is living off their laptop. They don't have a physical location. They can run their business anywhere because their business is online. It's a completely digital business.
I have a colleague and he's a former client of mine who caters to passport bros. You know what a passport bro is?
Yeah, I know what a passport bro is. They're a very interesting select group of people.
Okay, sounds like you don't necessarily approve, but that's okay. We'll leave it at that. Your podcast has achieved over 100,000 downloads annually and ranks in the top 10% globally. Wow. Phil's won multiple awards from the Scene Snobs. I'm not sure who those are, but including Best Business Podcast in 2020 and 2023. Hold the mustard. That is quite an honor. The Best Business Podcast?
Yeah, so the Scene Snobs are an independent podcast community. It's actually a network of podcasts now. The main guy, Mick Manhattan, an amazing podcaster in his own right, decided to honor independent podcasters, so podcasters who don't have big businesses behind them, to showcase all these amazing podcasts. Because there's about 4 million of us out there, podcasters. So half of them, or probably more than half, are not independent. They are business run podcasts. So they have big money behind them and they're not bootstrapping their businesses. So he decided to honor them. And in in 2020, when I launched the Invest in Yourself podcast, it was in November I started recording. December I launched. March of 2021, I submitted my podcast without any hope. I was just like, you know what? Throw it against the wall, see if it works. And I ended up beating out podcasts that had been around for at least 2 to 3 years, that had dedicated following, and were much, in my view at the time, were way better qualified to be a best business podcast.
How
But I
did you,
want,
if I could push the pause button, so I
yeah,
want
sure.
to do this. So this orientation of what the hell, let's throw some stuff against the wall and see what sticks. Has that gotten you, first of all, is that common for you? And when you, if not, or if it is, when you do that, is your intuition usually correct?
So it's something when it comes to podcasting, I do all the time, because since there's only 4 million podcasts out there, the market is still huge, right? And we're still in the infancy of podcasting, because the first podcast was launched in the late 80s
Who
and didn't
was it?
really, yeah, it was actually just a way for people just to share notes. It was always scientists, right? Scientists seem to start everything. The first webcam, the first live cam was to check to make sure the coffee was still filled, so that they didn't have to go and walk in and be like, no coffee. They're like, oh, there's no coffee. Okay, cool. I'll wait till someone makes the coffee.
Know that.
So podcasting really just started as this way of sharing information in the late 80s and early 90s. And then when Steve Jobs came out and said, here's the iPod, and you can have podcasts from it. And then it started taking off, but it didn't really hit the huge wave that we are now until Joe Rogan, right? Joe Rogan got his $100 million deal, and everybody
Wow.
was like, what, podcasting is real? You can make money? Because before, barely anybody was making money, and it wasn't a very open community. We were very close chested with how we were making money growing our podcasts and that. So I just figured, you know what? Since I started the Feel Better show, I've been throwing things against the wall. 80% of the stuff sticks,
Wow.
20% falls off. It's,
Wow.
yeah.
I say wow because this is so contrary to, I love contrarian opinions. This is what I seek. I seek people who think outside the box and disconnect the dots and color outside the lines, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems to me most real entrepreneurs would say, okay, before I throw things against the wall, let me think what could go wrong, what could happen, and let me vet it. But since you're not, speak into that. Speak into my pushback here.
So I'm not a traditional entrepreneur. I'm not someone who is like, I'm going to make money. I'm going to go into business. I'm going to be a marketing specialist. I'm going to be a coach or anything like that. I started because I wanted to be famous, if you will. I wanted to be, the Kevin Smith, right? I want to be the Canadian version of Kevin Smith. So I'm like, he has a podcast. He's done all these great things, and he's pivoted a lot of times in his career. And I'm like, if he can do it, I can do it, right? And so I was like, let me just try. And you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know that when you're running a business, you have to have this in place. And same with a podcast, because there hasn't been a standardization, if you will, of podcasting with the methods and madness to grow your podcast. You're pretty much in the Wild West. So anything can work. And when you start interviewing amazing entrepreneurs like yourself, you start realizing, holy shit, anything can work. So let me just take this advice that, Paul gave me and see if it works. Oh shit, it works, because, you've worked it out to a point where it works for your business. So it should be able to work on this business over here, or this podcast, because a podcast is a business. It's a radio show for the digital age, because you're listening to it either through audio or you're watching it on YouTube. So if you're watching it on YouTube, some people are actually watching the full thing, or they have it minimized and they're listening to it. So it's
Right.
still, again, you're listening to audio. And so if you're working with audio, anything's possible. So just try as much as you want. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You move on to the next thing. And that's always been my kind of modum apparatus. Let's just try it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I actually have a hat that's staring at me that says challenge accepted.
Show us. I want to see that hat. I don't
Uh,
you put it on.
Put it on. It's challenge accepted.
Did you have that? Did you create that hat?
I so wish I did. I didn't. It's actually from a YouTube channel called Yes Theory, which started in Montreal for international students going to university here, did something called Project 30, which is do 30 things that you've never done in your life, right? And so they filmed it and then it grew to Yes Theory, where they start doing things to expand their horizon, push back and any challenges. And one of the people they worked with, I can't remember her name, but she's an amazing YouTuber who does a whole bunch of challenges. She tried to get into the Secret Service. She's done fireman challenge, like done fireman stuff.
I want to meet this human. I want to get her on my podcast.
I will. When I can, I don't want to jump on and like completely derail and go over here, but as soon as we're done here, I will send you the video talking about her, and you can get to know her.
Okay,
they actually,
good.
she was part of one of the boxing celebrity or influencer boxing events for YouTubers, and she's never boxed, and so the Yes family actually paid, like they were like, hey, we're going to help you and you'll be one of our athletes, if you will.
Cool.
And so they were part of her sponsorship for this and helped pay for it, and they did a whole video on her doing it as well as her own video. And so they came up with a clothing part of their clothing line. Their clothing line is called Seek Discomfort, and so they also seek discomfort. And I resonated with that. So again,
yeah, it resonates with me too on many levels. You're right. I'm kind of going off on a sidetrack, but this is part of my either skill or setbacks.
It's a skill.
Okay, all right. You've had clients like Lloyd Ross and Kyle Staymaker. You've helped them achieve podcast success, and you're currently launching How to Be a Badass Entrepreneur podcast.
Yes, I am.
Coach Dan Gordon. Let's talk about that. What I think I get an idea now of what you mean by badass, but what again, that woman who you just described, that's a badass. She takes on challenges and goes all in. Is that what you mean by badass?
Yes and no. I think a badass is anybody who lives their authentic life without reservation, without worrying about what other people think.
I love it.
And with Coach Dan, he has a podcast with the badass. I'm blanking on the name, which really sucks. It's not How to Be a Badass Entrepreneur. It's You Are a Badass Entrepreneur. It's something along the lines of Badass Entrepreneur.
Right.
And he came on my podcast and we chatted and we just clicked, right? And he came to me, he's like, I want to do another podcast, but because he's dealing with high level entrepreneurs, right? The people who can afford his services. And he's like, I kind of want to get the people who aren't there yet, but he wants them in his ecosystem, right? So that they learn from him and then they can eventually become one of his clients or one of his future guests on his big time podcast. And so I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like, because it's a lead into his business of being a badass entrepreneur, because he believes he's a badass entrepreneur. He's been in the business so long. And he helps so many people be badass, be the best version of themselves. Because I think if you're a badass, you're the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
Because you are living, again, your authentic life. You're living who you are meant to be. And a lot of people don't know how to do that. So it's like, how can you be a badass entrepreneur? And so we are just interviewing people and we are being direct with them with the help. We no holds barred. We even ask them in the questionnaire before they come on, how do you like your advice? Do you want to be coddled? Do you want some some friendly love, or do you want the tough love that you hear? And to be honest, anybody who picks the coddled, we put them at the end of the list because we aren't for the coddling.
I love that.
If you're going to be a badass, you need to have that advice that's going to slap you in the face and say, wake up, buddy, you're fucking up, right? So he came to me. We're busting ass with these amazing guests. He's fantastic when it comes to systems and organization. That
Right.
is somewhere I'm weak at. I'm a visionary. I see the big picture. And for me, I'm like, okay, here's the big picture. And then I try and find people who can help me get to the big picture
Absolutely.
and put in place the individuals.
I salute your both your insight and your humility in recognizing there are just some things you can't do. I'm the same thing. I would be embarrassed and ashamed to show you what my desk looks like. Yeah.
I'm pretty Paul, I'm pretty sure our desk probably look exactly the same, overstuffed with stuff, things that shouldn't be on the desk, papers that should have been filed months ago. Trust me, I can see your desk because I'm looking at your desk right now on my end.
I like you, dude. We got to have continue to talk after this. So your mission is to help over 100 million podcast hosts succeed by sharing your expertise and passion for digital entrepreneurship. Let me say, one of your problems is you aim low and you don't have any ambition. You're a slacker. Get off your ass. 100 million. That's
It's a small number, you know.
I'm kidding with you.
I
I'm
I I, I realized. I always it's like the saying, "Go big or go home," right? If you don't have a big dream, you have nothing guiding you in life. And
absolutely.
um, when I first started, like I had no ambition to be an entrepreneur because I never had any entrepreneurs in my life. I started the Digital Entrepreneur podcast specifically because I had no idea how to be an entrepreneur. Right? They don't teach you in school. They
No,
teach you to be a 9 to 5er, right? Because the whole school is really eight
right.
hours, two breaks, a lunch. What's work? 8 hours, two breaks, and a lunch. Or if you're lucky, you got 9 hours and an hour lunch. And I was always in that mode. I was brought up that way. And then in 2020, I actually had a burnout from working a 9 to 5. And I was like, okay, I need to take a step back here. I have to reevaluate what's good for Phil. And I put all my podcasts on hold, did nearly daily therapy, was weekly therapy to figure out what was going on in my brain. Why
Can I
was I
ask what
feeling?
modality you used? Because I've been through a lot of therapy myself. The only thing that helped me is dialectical behavior therapy. What did you use? What was
Uh, I'm not sure. I was just talking. I was just it was pretty much it wasn't therapy like, okay, Philip, let's analyze this aspect of your
yes,
life
I
and
get it.
see.
I get it.
It was just I needed someone that I could 100% trust, that I could just vent everything out and they would give me that insight. Like I'm standing in front of the forest and I need someone with the 3,000 height view saying, no, the
Understood.
path is just to your left. You're nearly there. Just take a step to your left and you'll see the path. And like it wasn't cognitive behavior therapy. It wasn't any of
Got
these
it. Got it.
crazy types. I'm like, I just need to get all this poison,
Got
if
it.
you will, out of my body and
Got
to
it.
make sure that I'm not insane. Pretty much it was like, I'm not going insane, right? I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And my therapist was like, yeah, you're good, Phil. Don't worry. I've dealt with people who are on the insane spectrum. You're far from it. You're insane because you want to be a podcast entrepreneur, but that's something different. Reality, you're good. You see reality as it is. And so with that therapy, I started looking into digital entrepreneurship because I grew up with the internet, right? I was there when it was like I was born pretty much at the same time the internet was, but then I heard all the like, oh, you can't really make money. It's all scams and this in the early 90s.
Right.
And then the 2001, the web bubble blew up, right? And then no one was doing money. And then 2020 came around and then everybody was like, yeah, you can make money drop shipping or, affiliate
I
marketing,
remember that.
all these things. And I'm like, whoa, where was this when I was growing up? Like, why wasn't I told about this? So I started doing a deep dive into it and I'm like, I have no idea how to run a business. I have no idea what it takes to run a business. I know what it takes to run a podcast because I've been doing it for nearly a decade at that point. And then I decided, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to interview these people because I can make a good podcast, right? So pretty much my first pretty much season to 2 seasons was me literally just getting entrepreneurs on and I'm going, so my audience wants to know, how did you start? What did you do? What was the path you took? And then it was just literally me asking questions with problems I was faced with, but but saying it was my audience wanted to know. And that led me to understand, oh, anything can be an entrepreneur. If you have a specialty, someone's going to pay you for it. And when I landed my first client, I was like, holy shit. Lloyd was my first client. He came on to promote his book that he had written. And this is a guy who he was in Dubai as a lawyer for real estate. And like, you're in Dubai, right? Like, that's the land of supercars. And he was driving a Hyundai Elantra. He didn't even own it. He was renting it or leasing it.
Ah,
He drove it into the ground. He had to do it like 4 times. He had to renew the lease on 4 different cars because of how much he just ran it into the ground. And he used the stock market to leverage to get his financial freedom. And now he's back home in Australia, living the high life, relaxing. He's writing his third book. His podcast has won awards. Like, he's living the life. And I'm like, cool. He's my first client, launched his podcast. And then it was just from there, it was just like boom, boom, boom. People were like, oh, you have this podcast. You know how to do the podcast. What can I do? And they started paying me to help them with their podcast, either fully producing it or just giving them the pieces of advice that will take them to the next level for their podcast, or showing them like, hey, this is probably going to be a better tool for you and it's going to save you time and energy. Because I was running my podcast by myself. So I was a solopreneur in the podcast space without realizing I was a fucking entrepreneur.
wow. I love that. I love it. By the way, I'm just going to give you a compliment and an idea. You're very, very charismatic.
Thank you.
Very charismatic and dynamic. I don't know if you've done public speaking before or not, but if you haven't, I'm going to plant a little seed in your imagination because I could easily see you doing it.
To be honest, I have thought about it. I used to do theater when I was in high school. So and my dream was always to be a star on the TV show or be an actor. So I always pushed myself to be that charismatic person. I believe that you can do anything you want if you put your mind to it, and I just kept pushing myself. And this podcast gives me the chance, right, to be the authentic self of myself, who is charismatic, who just loves sharing stuff.
It's you.
And it's just me. It's who I am at the core. So if you pay me, great. If you don't, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter to me because I know someone will pay me because they feel aligned with what I'm doing.
I love that attitude. They'll pay you because they feel aligned with what you're doing. Love it. This is great. Let's see. Podcast Mogul's Playbook, Leveraging Podcasts for Maximum Impact. That's the name of the title. This is so interesting. We've already talked so much. Let's talk about Harry's Razor. So first, tell people about that brand for those of us who don't know, because I'm more of a disposable Gillette kind of guy. But what is Harry's
You're
Razor?
old school. I'm new school. That's how we work, Paul. So Harry's Razor started off as these two guys who were just fed up of Gillette, pretty much, because of the cost of the getting the razor is fine. It's the renewal of the razors, getting the new pack of just razors was astronomical. So they went out and bought an old, like, I think it's at the time when they bought it was like 100-year-old razor factory. They made German razors, and they bought it, and then they just reinvented how they were selling by going to podcasts. They simply reached out to podcasts and they're like, hey, we want to get you on, we want to sponsor your podcast. This is the idea, blah, blah, blah. And they did it to enough podcasts that now, probably nearly a decade later, they're in major stores. They're picked up by major brands. And they started pretty much on a podcast because, one, it's the cheapest form of advertising you can get. Right now, a 60-second spot in most podcasts will cost you $25 at every 1,000 impressions. So if you think about it, cost per average, right? If these people have 1,000 people listening and 1% say yes to buying, and your razors cost, let's say, $15, you're covered the cost of $25 to sponsor that podcast.
Those are damn good numbers. I wasn't aware of that. Now, this is a piece of nugget, not a nugget, a boulder you just dropped. It's the most effective way to advertise your product or service is to be on a pod. I didn't know that at all.
Because one, you have other people doing this, the promotion for your brand, right? I pay you $25, Paul, and you're like, this is the script you need to use. Read it some point during your podcast, and yeah, thanks so much, right? And here's your affiliate link. So on top of that $25, every person who signs up will send you $5, right? Or your audience will get 15% off. So now the podcaster is more incentivized. Like, if I send people to it, I'm going to get more money from the $25, right? And so what you're doing is you're leveraging people's greed, which is always useful because everybody wants money in this society, right? It's not cheap to live in our world today.
No.
But you're also borrowing the authenticity and the authority that the podcast host has created with their audience, because their audience has come to trust the host. So if you have someone, it's like your best friend coming over to you and saying, hey,
brilliant,
you should go buy this product because it's fucking great, or it's stay away from this brand because they're fucking criminals. Now that you're going to take that to heart. Same with a podcast host.
Wow.
A podcast host is living inside the person's head. Like, I'm listening to headphones, right? So the only information coming in is the podcast that I'm listening to. So you become more aware of things, you become more trusting, right? In marketing, I learned there's the seven points of contact that you need for someone to form trust. But if you're listening to a podcast, that's 7 episodes that they can come to like, know, and trust you. And if you have 7 episodes of you talking about how you help people become the best version of themselves, or get over a certain aspect in their business, their life, or just in anything to help them have that better life, they're going to come trust you even more. So if you say, hey, I use Harry's razors, you should too. The link is in the show notes. Not only do you get an additional 15% off, but you're helping the podcast stay afloat.
That's a brilliant model. It's a brilliant model. Did you come up with that model?
I fucking wish I did. I wish I did.
Who came up?
No, I have no idea who came up with it. I'm guessing it's amalgamation of a whole bunch of different types of advertising styles into one. You have the radio broadcasters, right? But they don't get any affiliate money. They just get the brand, the here's a $10,000 for branding. But then you're bringing in affiliate marketing, which is a great brand as well. But now you're taking affiliate marketing and you're mixing in with audio, video, whatever you want. So it's taking it to the next level. And a lot of other brands are jumping on. You have the razor, Manscaped. They started off like that. You know, everybody knows Manscaped. You have Joe Rogan, who is like right now the pioneer. He has like his alpha brain. He's bringing his own businesses into it. You have Mr. Beast, who's doing like the Feastables, the Mr. Beast burgers, all these things, and he's using the new medium of video and audio, YouTube and podcasts, to sell his stuff, because he goes on.
Brilliant. If I could, and the other aspect of it, rather than pouring money into Instagram ads, where there's so much, not only so much competition, but how much can you squeeze in to a 30-second video, as opposed to being a guest or someone who over time builds credibility because the host says they use it and they really love it. I myself just bought something called ground.news, which is a news service that rates, because I saw it advertised on a podcast, which rates how biased the particular story is. Does it lean left? Does it lean right? What's its fact check score? Because I want to know that, because everything is so biased. So I see the model. It's a really brilliant one. 2 things. We are out of time. Second, you are one of my top most favoriteest guests. So I want you back on the show for real.
if you will come back, I would really, really like that.
Send me the link. I'll book it, and we'll be chatting for hours.
Okay, and stay tuned. Stay on with me after we officially end it, because I want to chat with you a little bit more.
Of course.
One more thing. I know my audience is going to want to stay in the conversation with you. How do they do that?
The best and simplest way of doing it is to follow me on Instagram. It's at the podcast mogul. Simple as that, the podcast mogul. Search me on Instagram. You'll find me there. Now, if you want to get some free advice, you can go to, I know you're a podcaster. I'm speaking specifically to the podcasters that listen to your podcast, because I know there's at least 2 to 3 of them that are listening, because podcasters listen to podcasts. Go to thepodcastmogul.com/resources, and you will get my ultimate resource guide for podcasters that will help you with all the tools that I use that streamline my system, so that I'm not spending hours on my podcast or fixing my podcast. I'm spending that hours finding the best guests and promoting my podcast.
Cool. All right. Phil, thank you for being really fun. You were really fun to talk to. I really enjoyed it. You are very charismatic, as well as knowing your shit. And that makes for a really, really great guest and a great episode. Speaking of which, we'll see you on the next one. This has been your hostess, not your hostess, your host with the most. Oh, I just gave something away, which I shouldn't have. Your host with the most, Paul Ross. We'll see you on the next episode of The Influencer's Edge.
The Influencer's Edge is brought to you by the Rapid Sales Accelerator. If you're ready to skyrocket your sales by 30% or more in just 90 days, then you need to claim your free training right now. You'll learn 4 words that will compel your prospects to trust you like they were children within the first 3 to 5 minutes of any conversation across any platform and any medium. You'll learn how to give your prospects objection amnesia, to crush objections like, I need to talk to my spouse, or I need more time to think it over, or it's too expensive. If you'd like to claim your free training now, go to www.paulrossbook.com. Do it before your competition does it now. Thank you for tuning in to the Influencer's Edge, where you get the latest breakthroughs, cutting-edge insights, tools, and techniques so you can leapfrog over the pack in sales, influence, and persuasion. Remember to visit our website at www.theinfluencersedge.com to enjoy even more great episodes like this one. We look forward to seeing you again on the Influencer's Edge Show.